Well, well, well. Looks like I can actually make videos in a timely manner, huh? I recorded and wrote this immediately after finishing the Zelda 2 script. I have also been looking forward to making this video since I started outlining this project a couple of years ago, so that was a pretty good motivator. Originally, I wrote one massive script with every mainline game in it that was 59 pages long, and it's so old that Tears of the Kingdom is still called Breath of the Wild 2. And Link to the Past was about 8 pages of that original script, 14% of the overall total. This is my second favorite game of all time, and was my favorite game of all time for many, many years. I think this is as close as possible to a perfect gaming experience, and is what got me into this hobby at 4 years old when I played it for the first time. This is an insanely personal game to me, and I'm going to do my very best to not just spend the entire time singing its praises, but that is going to be the majority of the video. That being said, our next leg of the journey brings us to 4 years in the future, to November 21st, 1991. Things have changed pretty majorly in the gaming world since Zelda 2. In this time, Nintendo, while still the leader in the home gaming market, was losing its stake as the main contender in the US to the upstart arcade company, Sega. While the Master System had been unable to overthrow Nintendo's flagship system, the Famicom, or the NES in the States, the Mega Drive, or the Genesis, was a beast. Its hardware was far stronger than that of the NES, with 16-bit graphics, a 512 color display with 61 on screen at the same time, and a much beefier sound chip. The Mega Drive couldn't overtake the sales of the Famicom in Japan, but it pulled a major share of the market in the US by demonstrating all of the ways the Genesis was better than the NES. Or, put simply, all the ways Sega did what Nintendo don't. A year later, Nintendo responded with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or Super Famicom, but it was too little too late. Many parents at the time did not see the point in upgrading from the console they already had and refused to buy Nintendo's new, more expensive system. Many of them believed it to be a scam in kind of way, scummy even, for Nintendo to sell a new console and prevent you from buying games on your NES at this point. This led to Sega gaining a major market share in the 1990s, with them often outselling Nintendo 2-1 in the US and Europe, though Nintendo remained supreme in their home market of Japan. This belief that Nintendo was just trying to force people to buy a new product they didn't need was only further bolstered by them functionally remaking a lot of their previous games on new hardware. Super Mario Bros. 4, or Super Mario World in the US, Super Castlevania 4, and Super Metroid did very little to distinguish themselves from their NES counterparts. Hell, Super Castlevania 4 and Super Metroid were both just remakes of Castlevania and Metroid for the NES on new hardware. And of course, we have Link to the Past, returned to the top-down perspective, a wide variety of weapons and items, dungeon progression more in line with Zelda 1, and the return of Koji Kondo's scoring, all of which bring Link to the Past much closer to Zelda's first iteration than its second. But Link to the Past is more than a beefed-up clone of Zelda 1, unlike Super Metroid or Super Castlevania 4 with their first games. Link to the Past is the first Zelda game with a strong identity. Gone are the days of unknown exploration and headbanging from Zelda 1, along with the frustrating linearity of Zelda 2, and replaced with the grand quest across the worlds of Hyrule and the Dark World filled to bursting with charm and passion. In my previous videos, I broke the games up into distinct gameplay conventions and the way that those worked together to create the overall experience, but Link to the Past is a much larger beast than Zelda 1 or Adventure of Link. I know this game like the back of my hand, and it still took nearly 7 hours to collect all of the footage for this video. For a comparison, Zelda 1 and 2 combined took me just short of 8 hours to complete. As such, I'm going to be discussing this game differently than the first two videos, following along with the game as it reveals its story, mechanics, and the dungeon progression. Unlike either of its predecessors, Link to the Past's story is not hidden in manuals, but is clear and present from the start of the game. If you wait on the title screen for a few seconds, it will fade away and be replaced by a text crawl of a legend detailing the capture of the Triforce by an evil being named Ganondorf, and how 7 wise men sealed him away within the Golden Land. Then it tells of the modern day and how the wizard Aghanim has killed the king, captured the descendants of the 7 wise men, and vanished them, with Princess Zelda being the only one left before the seal to the Dark World is shattered. This is the stuff that sets the tone for the quest you're about to set on. The first human you see in A Link to the Past's story is a fucking skeleton, and the evil wizard is about to get everything he wants. After this, you start the game and Link is contacted telepathically by Princess Zelda, who tells him she's been captured by the wizard and thrown into the dungeon. Your uncle then tells you to remain in the house and leaves with his sword and shield in tow. This is where the invisible tutorial of Link to the Past begins. Ignoring the warning of your uncle, you leap from your bed and begin to explore your house. There are two interactable objects in the room, the pots and the chest. If you open the chest, you find the lantern that you'll need in the adventure ahead, and if you grab the pots, you will learn that you can throw them and find hearts underneath. Immediately, wordlessly, Link to the Past communicates with the player that they should interact with objects in the overworld since they can restore hearts and be on the lookout for chests that can hold integral quest items. Then you leave your house and head into the rain. This is the developers flexing the hardware of the SNES a bit, utilizing an animated overlay that wasn't possible on the NES to have the land cast in shadow with rain falling all around you. It also allows them to show off the upgraded color palette, where the NES only had a display of 12 colors in the foreground and 13 in the background from a selection of 56 overall colors. The SNES has a display of 32,768 colors with up to 256 on screen at the same time. This allows for more complex sprite coloring than either of the previous games and even the implementation of some rudimentary shading on sprites that aren't that big. Heading down from the ledge where your house sits, Link to the Past demonstrates another new addition, the selective Z-axis. The game has obviously chosen to fall in line with Zelda 1 and retain the top-down perspective of that game, but as I've said, the SNES was significantly more powerful than its predecessor. All of the game is on a 2D plane, but when you reach a point such as a ledge or a staircase where you would go up to a higher elevation than an enemy or other objects, the game is able to distinguish between the two, allowing the developers to add much more verticality to Link to the Past than the previous titles. It is also here that, if you want, you can choose to interact with the guards. Some will present the player with what the face buttons on your controller do, namely that A allows you to pick up items if you hadn't done so in the house or outside before approaching them, that X opens your map, showing you that this game has an in-game map rather than one in the manual, and that B will swing your sword once you get it. However, this puts the onus on the player to seek out these hints. It wasn't until very recently that I learned these guards will actually give hints to the player. I learned all of this organically by the level design presented in Link to the Past, or just through pressing the buttons myself, wondering what they did. Once you're acquainted with what the face buttons do, the road from your house leads north, naturally highlighting a path for the player to follow towards the castle. Following the path north, you reach Hyrule Castle, where you are informed you can't come inside due to the storm. However, there is a path off to the side, still highlighting for the player where they're supposed to go without telling them. Following it, you reach a patch of bushes, where Link can pick one up and reveal a secret tunnel. However, if you take too long, Zelda will tell you that there is a secret entrance in the garden, and you discover that interacting with objects in the overworld can lead to hidden secrets. After this, you get your sword, and your uncle provides one of only 2 text hints during this tutorial that the player is forced to see, the button prompt of how to use your spin attack. After this, you are free to explore the first semi-dungeon of Link to the Past. Hyrule Castle is a great intro to A Link to the Past and does everything to teach the player what they'll be doing for the majority of the game's playtime. Exiting the room where your uncle was attacked, you are introduced to the first variation of the soldier enemy that will become commonplace in your adventure across Hyrule. The first holds a dagger and simply wanders about without much care to go after Link, even if he's spotted. Then you encounter the guards with swords, who will do their best to chase down the player if they spot them. They also introduce the sword clanking mechanic, where some enemies can block Link's attack and even push him back slightly if you don't strike at the right area. Of course, this introduction also allows the player time to familiarize themselves with Link's sword swing. Unlike the previous 2 games, you do not get a sword beam while at full health, breaking the convention that they had established. But Link more than makes up for that with this wide, fast, horizontal swipe. You also have the spin attack, requiring a bit of time to charge up, but providing you with an attack that covers all sides and deals more damage than your regular sword swing. Not only does the spin attack do more damage when it's fully charged, but you can also move while charging it, allowing you to sneak in attacks and avoid sword clanking. Combined with Link's ability to move in all 8 directions instead of just 4, it makes combat feel fast and responsive, a far cry from the sluggish pace of the first 2 games. And by the time you've acclimated to the combat, you run into the purple soldiers, who have more health than their initial green variant, following Zelda 1 and 2 and using visual cues to demonstrate different strength to enemies of the same type. After traversing through the upper floors, you eventually make it to the basement and descend deeper into the dungeon, where you find your first key in a chest, once again introducing players to a mechanic that will be vital to dungeons and the rest of the game. Battling your way through and learning that enemies will also fall off ledges if they're pushed, you eventually find the boomerang that acts almost identically to its initial Zelda 1 counterpart. It can fly in all 8 directions and stuns enemies instead of damaging them when they're struck. You were given this item just before encountering the Ball and Chain Guard, a kind of mini-boss for this dungeon. This presents the perfect opportunity to use your new weapon, allowing you to stun him and get in hits before his weapon can strike you. Or, if earlier in the dungeon you learned that pots can damage enemies, you can stun him and use the pots at the top of the room to take him out in 2 hits. Doing either, you are rewarded with the big key, allowing you to save Zelda from her cell. After this, she tasks you with taking her to Sanctuary and tells you of a hidden passage further back up in the castle. Pushing aside this banister, the 2 of you make your way through the sewers, fighting through darkness and finding these braziers that can be lit up with your lantern. Winding your way through, you eventually reach this room, where Zelda tells you can pull levers by hitting A. Doing so, you make your way into Sanctuary, finally freeing Zelda from Ganon. And now, at the very end, when you've made it through the dungeon, defeated a boss of sorts, and received an item and the big key, you are granted a full heart container for your efforts. And this is a cycle that will repeat for every other dungeon in this game. You'll head inside, find keys, grab the big key, an item, defeat a boss, and get a heart container. Wordlessly, solely by prompting player agency, Link to the Past teaches you everything that you need to know about exploring dungeons, combat, and a vast majority of overworld interactions. Now equipped with all the tools you'll need, the game can truly begin in earnest. With Zelda safe, you speak with her and the priest at the Sanctuary, where they tell you about the legend of the Triforce and the Dark World and how they think you can defeat Ganon. Supposedly, in the days of yore, a sword was forged that could seal and repel darkness, the Master Sword. However, the ability to claim the sword is hidden from them, so they task you with traveling to Kakariko Village to find a descendant of the 7 wise men from the intro. And this presents the last of the core gameplay loop of Link to the Past. You have a point marked on your map, and you're set loose on the world. But if you want to explore, you can get another complete heart container from the best edition in Link to the Past, Heart Pieces. These are the perfect items to fill the land of Hyrule. You are not immediately stronger, allowing the designers to sprinkle them throughout the game without outwardly affecting balance too badly. But they still feel rewarding because you know that you are building up to the full reward of getting a heart container. It's genius, and it's so clear why almost every other Zelda game kept them as a mainstay item for decades after Link to the Past. Choosing to explore the land of Hyrule also shows off more of the gorgeous visuals in this game. Link to the Past operates with the same screen system that Zelda 1 had, with Link transitioning between segmented pieces of a greater map. But unlike Zelda 1, these are not all locked to the same dimensions and are actually varied in size and shape. This allows the developers to affect verticality, the different waterways that travel through Hyrule, and just generally show off that it is not one homogenized shape. You also get a moment to appreciate these cute little flares throughout the game. Hearts dropped from enemies will flutter to the ground, rupees fall from flying enemies when they're slain, flowers bounce in a little dance, Link kicks up little dust clouds when he runs, and enemies explode into smoke when they die. It all adds up to create a visual experience that is still gorgeous to this day. The game also utilizes the SNES's Mode 7 effects to perfection, allowing for little things like the Triforce to spin to completion in the intro, and the scrolling of the map while it's zoomed in, or the parallaxing of backgrounds in places like Death Mountain. And while we're discussing the beauty of this game, I have to take a moment to gush about the music. Returned is the legendary Koji Kondo, and he absolutely blows it out of the park with some of the best music he's written in the series. With the additional audio channels and wider array of instruments that the SNES could emulate that aren't nearly as bit-crushed as before, Koji Kondo turned in some of the best music in the entire franchise. His reworking of the Zelda 1 Hyrule Field theme for this game is the track I hear in my mind when I think of exploring Hyrule. It also introduced some of the series' most iconic leitmotifs like the Hyrule Castle theme, Zelda's Lullaby, or the Great Fairy Fountain. And of course, when we get to them, I will have nothing but praise for the music of the dungeons and the Dark World as a whole. Choosing to explore also serves to help familiarize you with this new iteration of Hyrule. Before you enter the first real dungeon of the game, you can get bombs, 2 bottles, another item originating from this game, the bug net, the magic powder, a healthy amount of rupees, and the ice rod. But doing so will take you all across the overworld from the Lost Woods all the way down to Lake Hylia. This teaches you that exploration is absolutely worth it in Link to the Past by providing you with an enhanced arsenal solely through player-driven action. Of course, not all players will choose to engage with this and instead beeline straight for the point on their map where they will be told more about the Master Sword, building it up further in your mind as something to look forward to. But then, you are left with no map marker. Sahasrara's wife is unsure of where he's gone and tasks you with wandering Kakariko to find someone who might know where he is. From here, you might discover one of the signs around town saying that you kidnapped Princess Zelda and learn that some of the townsfolk are afraid of you, calling guards on the player that you have to fight off. Speaking with others, they tell you that they believe you are a good kid and could have never done something so evil as kidnapping the princess. But it's only once you've traveled through all of Kakariko and made it to the southern edge of the village that you meet the kid who tells you that Sahasrara has hidden himself away by the Eastern Palace and marks that on your map. This gives you the opportunity to find bombs, 2 bottles, 2 heart pieces, talk to this kid who's dying with pneumonia and steal his bug net, find out that the blacksmith's partner has gone missing and that this old guy's son has also disappeared, all without having to leave the beaten path. And then you set out, completing one big loop around your house, letting you return and open the chest if you failed to interact with it the first time. This right here is one of the best parts of Link to the Past. If you choose to ignore the chest at the start, you can pick the lantern up later when you first enter Hyrule Castle, or from the chest next to Zelda in the dungeon. This will then put a few rupees in the other chests, never forcing the player to pick it up. And this goes for several other key items we'll get to later. The game will not force your hand, letting you go at whatever pace you dictate. And sometimes you even get slightly different dialogue from some of these interactions. For example, when you arrive at the Eastern Palace, you can entirely miss Sahasrara and complete the dungeon, and he will be shocked once you come to speak with him already bearing the Pendant of Courage. Or you can speak with him and have him give you the quest to go and claim the pendant so you can get the Master Sword. Even when you are on a linear path like the first 3 dungeons, if you know where you're going, you can largely ignore the parts where the game chooses to guide you, or you can follow along with the story and let the game help you. Regardless of how you approach, due to the linearity of the first third of the game, your path will lead you to the Eastern Palace. Once inside, you are presented with the first true dungeon of the game, and with it, the key difference between Link to the Past and its predecessors. Like the Adventure of Link, Link to the Past will change up not just the colors of each dungeon, but the tiling as well, easily identifying each at a glance. But Link to the Past goes a step further than either by having each dungeon themed around a mechanic, or some kind of gimmick. The Eastern Palace largely exists to teach the player about switches and how they will affect the dungeon's rooms. For example, when you reach this room, there are 2 anti-fairies and a Popo by this button. Running down, you hit the switch and you can either wrap back around to avoid the anti-fairies, or very quickly run up back to the door. Or you can use the magic powder to turn the anti-fairies back into fairies, though you do run the risk of losing a good chunk of health and magic if you miss. There are moments like this all across the dungeon, providing many opportunities to ingrain in the player what these buttons do and the obstacles they might face when encountering them. The Eastern Palace is also where you gain access to the bow, and it has the Igors, enemies that are easy to beat if you have the bow, but difficult if you don't. In fact, while the green Igors can be defeated by hitting them with your sword or by throwing a pot at them, the red Igors can only be defeated by 2 shots from the bow. These enemies prepare you for later dungeons and your fight with the Armos Knights, all of whom you can defeat with the sword, but become much easier to deal with if you use your bow. The Armos Knights are tanky bosses, requiring 16 hits from your sword to kill, or 3 shots from your bow. Besting 5 of the 6, the final one will regain all of the health it lost and begin to attack Link more ferociously, moving faster, dealing more damage, and just generally being more of a nuisance. But even he is defeated after 3 more shots from the bow, granting you the Pendant of Courage. The Eastern Palace is by no means the most difficult or complex dungeon, but it doesn't have to be, serving instead as the intro to get your feet wet before delving into the later dungeons. But if you are struggling, you can try to find one of these, a telepathy tile. Interacting with it, you are contacted by Sahasrahla, who will do his best to help guide you in the right direction. However, similar to much of Link to the Past's design, he will not directly tell the player exactly what they need to do. Instead, he will give you a hint in the form of a riddle, similar to the old hermits from Zelda 1. Once again, you are required to put the pieces together yourself, but now with a clearer picture of what's being asked of you. This is the perfect way, in my opinion, to teach a player what they need to know and maintain their agency in the adventure while still giving hints to the players who need them. The developers trusted the players to beat the game without having their hands held the entire time, but still allowed for players who were struggling to find their way. With the Pendant of Courage acquired, Sahasrahla will task Link with heading to the Desert of Mystery in order to clear the Desert Palace and claim the Pendant of Power, getting him one step closer to claiming the Master Sword, while also going deeper into the legends surrounding it and the Triforce than anyone else so far. He also gives you the Pegasus Boots, allowing Link to dash while holding down A. This is the best item in Link to the Past. The speed boost it provides shaves off so much time from your treks across Hyrule and lets you do damage to enemies as you blitz by. Not only that, but if you ram into these piles of rocks or even structurally weak walls, Link can destroy them and find several hidden secrets along the way, including a heart piece. Again, Link to the Past does not tell the player about this interaction, but quietly pushes you towards this fact by having a weak wall right behind Sahasrahla when you get them. When you do arrive at the Desert Palace, you can't access the dungeon as one of these large statues blocks the path up, and the tablet in front of it is written in a language you don't understand. Now, there are two paths for a player who reaches this point. If you further explore the desert, you can encounter Agina, Sahasrahla's brother, who will tell you to search for the Book of Medora in Kakariko. This sets the player off in the right direction immediately, but it's not the only way you can come across this answer. Just like the soldiers telling Link about what the face buttons do in the intro, I didn't know Agina told the player anything useful until recently. I simply explored everywhere and realized that the book in the library just outside of Kakariko was on top of a bookshelf, perfectly placed to go flying if someone were to knock into it. So you smash into the shelf and collect the book, either motivated by Agina or your own intuition, and suddenly you can read the writing, and you make an oddly Catholic-looking prayer that lets you inside. The main gimmick of this dungeon is the sand across the floor. Just like the Desert of Mystery outside, the Desert Palace has enemies that will spring up from the ground and attack Link before disappearing below again. But each of them has a tell, a little animation of them emerging from the ground, and then another when they submerge again that allows the player plenty of time to react to the monster before it appears or disappears. Like the Eastern Palace, this is not a particularly complex dungeon. If you just go here, do this, and grab the power gloves, you make your way outside, head down here for a heart piece, and then head back inside. Now you can go here, do this little puzzle, and you're faced with the land molas. 3 sandworms that make use of Link to the Past's selective Z-axis to spring from the ground and fly over your head, though you can still hit their heads as they pass. Each time they do burst from the ground, they shoot 4 rocks in the cardinal directions, meaning sitting in wait at a diagonal is your safest bet. But once you've bested the second land mola, the final one will shoot rocks in all 8 directions, forcing you to step back and let the rocks fly past before you can beat it. Now equipped with the Pendants of Courage and Power, you have one last destination before you can get the Master Sword, the Tower of Hera, which sits atop Death Mountain. But you can and should take a short detour to the Hylia River before heading up to Death Mountain. With the Power Gloves, you can now travel to the source of the river and purchase the Zora Flippers for a whopping 500 rupees, letting you swim across the lakes and rivers of Hyrule for what is likely to be most, if not all, of your money. Now you can travel the water from anywhere, not relying on the boots to decide they want to work this time or setting off from any raft points. With the flippers, you now gain access to the Waterfall of Wishing, and can upgrade your shield to the Magic Shield, allowing it to block fireballs, and your boomerang to the Magic Boomerang, making its attack speed significantly higher and its reach stretch across the entire screen. You can also swim under this bridge to get a 3rd bottle and travel into this cave to meet Venus, Queen of the Fairies, and upgrade your bomb and arrow capacity. You also gain a type of fast travel, letting Link jump into a whirlpool and appear at a connected one, though most of them are in these kind of awkward spots, so it isn't the best fast travel system. After that quick detour, you ignore the king's orders and head up to Death Mountain, where you encounter an old man who needs your help getting through the caves. As you travel, he tells you about how he is the grandfather of one of the 7 maidens kidnapped by Aghanim, and how he hopes someone can find the golden power and put an end to all the evil in the world. To that end, he gives Link his magic mirror, an item that allows you to escape the Dark World and entrusts his mission to the young Hylian. With the old man safe and the mirror in your possession, you travel up to the top of the mountain and find your path blocked by Spectacle Rock. From this point forward, you cannot progress any further in the White World. But with the Power Gloves, you can move this stone and reveal a warp tile that will take you to the Dark World. The Dark World is what was once the Golden Land, corrupted by Ganon's wish on the Triforce, and manipulates the form of anyone who enters to reflect their heart. While in the Dark World, Link takes the form of an anthropomorphic rabbit, demonstrating his gentle heart despite the violence he uses throughout the game. It also prevents you from using any of your items, meaning Link is completely defenseless while he's here. The only thing that stops this is the Moon Pearl, the item that you need from the Tower of Hera, and the only way to return is the magic mirror given to you by the old man. And this interaction is how Link to the Past hides many of its secrets. The difference in terrain between the two maps allows the developers to force you to shift your perception of the world to apply both in order to get items. The first instance is Spectacle Rock, the first area you enter the Dark World. In Hyrule, there is no way for you to reach the top of the rocks from your vantage point, but in the Dark World, the spectacles are on the ground. So, if you stand on them in the Dark World and use your magic mirror, you are transported to the top of the rocks in the Light World and can enter the Tower of Hera. Again, this is shown to the player wordlessly, and you are expected to put these pieces together rather than having someone tell you. But before you continue, this specific section of the Dark World has a unique track to it. In fact, once you get the Moon Pearl, this track will change to the Death Mountain theme throughout the rest of the game, and it's one of those little flares that gives Link to the Past so much charm. Entering the Tower of Hera, you are again immediately shown the core gimmick of this dungeon. There are several switches that look something like a crystal ball colored blue, with these blue blocks up in your path. Throwing your boomerang, the crystal will switch color, and the blocks will drop down, pushing the orange ones up instead. This allows you to travel up and down through the levels where you will encounter the other main gimmick. On the second floor and above, you will encounter the Hard Hat Beetles, enemies that will knock Link back when struck. You also find massive holes in the floor, the tower beginning to collapse after years of improper maintenance. And if Link falls through one of these holes, he will land on one of the lower floors, potentially losing you several floors of progress, forcing you to make the climb back up with all of the enemies respawned. There are also these tiles with a star on them that, when interacted with, will switch the location of the holes in the floor. The thing about these tiles is, you don't actually have to interact with them for most of the dungeon, but it will make it impossible to access these pots, all of which have hearts in them. But that's fine, because if you jump down this hole, you can find a hidden room with fairies in it. This top level is the only spot you do have to interact with the star tiles. Stepping on this tile, it will move the hole from here to here, allowing you to jump down and claim the Moon Pearl. With it, you head up to face off against the final boss, the Moldrum of the Tower of Hera. Hopping down from your perch into its arena, the boss moves around wildly, bouncing off the walls it runs into. Link can only damage it by attacking its tail, and if Link hits the other parts of the Moldrum, he bounces backward and can fall through the gaps in the floor, resetting the boss fight. After a few hits, the Moldrum speeds up dramatically, bouncing sporadically across the platform before you defeat it. Now, with the Pendants of Virtue in hand, you travel down from Death Mountain and head into the Lost Woods, slowly making your way to the northwestern corner where you find a small, hidden glade. Animals hop about, sometimes lagging the game, but that's fine, and you make your way to the top where you find it. Sitting in a pedestal is this weapon that has been built up to for the entire game. The sword that repels evil, that seals darkness, the weapon that will defeat this evil wizard, the best newcomer to the Zelda lore, the Master Sword. This is what the entire first third of the game has been building up to, and when you pull it, you immediately understand why. With the Master Sword, you can now shoot sword beams while at full health, and it does double the damage of your previous sword, letting you kill green soldiers in one swipe and purple in two. It is the weapon in Zelda, and was on the box art for both the Japanese and PAL versions of the game. Now, you are ready. Having proven yourself to truly be the hero capable of pulling the Master Sword, you leave the woods, ready to bring down Aghanim and save the world. But not everything is well. When you exit the glade, you receive a telepathic message from Zelda where she tells you that the soldiers have invaded the sanctuary. Rushing to her aid, you arrive seconds too late, with Aghanim having stolen her back to Hyrule Castle and killing the priest. So, you rush back to Hyrule Castle, once again mounting an assault on the knights inside and battling your way up with all of your new items and skills until you reach the top. But once again, you're too late. Ganon was waiting this entire time for you and banishes Zelda to the Dark World in front of you, breaking a hole in the barrier between the two realms. He then vanishes, but following close behind him, Ganon begins monologuing at you, telling you how it's over, how he's won, how the Dark World will be open forever and Ganon will rule supreme. Sahasrahla also contacts you, telling you that even with the Master Sword, you cannot inflict physical damage to this wizard. He's just too strong. Ganon then begins teleporting around the room, charging these massive blasts of energy that he hurls at Link. But you have the Master Sword. You have the weapon, the sword that reflects evil and seals darkness. So, you send his magic back at him using this kid's bug net. Yeah, man, I don't know. The kid dying of bronchitis, yeah, his net can also throw magic back at Ganon. Couldn't tell you why. I'm sure it was some kind of coding error, but like, damn. Like, check this shit out. Bing bang bosh, he's done. I beat him. Beat him using a bug net. But, of course, even though I beat him, he wins in the cutscene, using the last of his remaining energy to banish you to the Dark World, hoping that the realm will be your doom. Now, in the Dark World, the stakes have risen. If Link takes too long, the barrier will fully shatter, and Ganon will be able to invade the Light World with the Golden Power, bringing Hyrule to ruin. Sahasrahla also tells you that your best place to start is the Dark Palace, and it also happens to be the only place you can access at this point. This is another one of those points where Link to the Past not forcing your hand can have an effect on the story. If you completed the Tower of Hera without collecting the Moon Pearl, something that did happen to me several times when I was a kid, you arrive in the Dark World and you turn into a rabbit. You can't progress unless you go back and make your way through the dungeon again. It's one of those brilliant things about having an item not tied directly to a dungeon's main gimmick. Allowing the player to miss it makes it feel like this is a real adventure, not just some manufactured ride where you have to hit certain beats before you can progress. It also introduces you to, let's face it, probably the best overworld theme in any Zelda game. I mean, look, I'm just gonna let you sit with it for a second and tell me this isn't just peak. Look, I gotta say, Koji Kondo has written some incredible music for Zelda. Zelda's Lullaby, the Song of Storms, the Ballad of the Goddess. But the Dark World theme is it. This is the song. This and Hyrule Field are like the Zelda songs. So, if you can avoid jamming out, you head back to the same spot as the Eastern Palace, get fleeced out of 110 rupees, and head inside. This dungeon doesn't really have a main gimmick, instead of opting to combine several of the lessons you learned from the first 3 dungeons to give you your first true complex one. Working your way up and down several floors, you find the hammer, the item you'll need not only to beat the boss, the Helmasaur King, but to progress further into the Dark World. Like the dungeons before it, the uses of the hammer are expected to be learned by the player without prompting. Sure, it says you can drive wooden stakes into the ground when you get it, but does this look like a wooden stake? And it certainly doesn't tell you that it will affect these little guys, it just throws them at you as soon as you get the hammer and expects you to put it together. I know I've emphasized this point a lot, but in a gaming landscape of a billion text pop-ups, forced tutorials, and yellow paint, the fact that Link to the Past can almost entirely teach the player without words what they need to do over the course of the game makes it such a masterpiece. Every concept builds upon itself, and the skills you gain in the Light World are tested and expounded upon once you genuinely begin your adventure in the Dark World. Now equipped with the hammer, you make your way down to the bottom of the dungeon and head into the boss battle against the Helmasaur King. With armor on his head, the Helmasaur King requires several hits from the hammer to break its crown before you can attack the large green spot in the middle of its head and take it down. Once you do beat the Helmasaur King, you free your first maiden, who tells you about how her power is limited, but with all 7 together, she believes you can defeat Ganon and return them to their proper forms. She also marks your map with the location of the other maidens before vanishing into your inventory. Following the mark on your map, your next stop swings you further down to the bottom middle of the map and to the Swamp Palace. To enter, you must take advantage of the fact that the Light World and the Dark World are connected, pulling this lever in the Light World to change the water level in both. Now you can head inside and gain access to one of the best water dungeons in gaming history. Historically, water levels suck because of the change in how the player moves in the play space. Usually, you will have one mode of locomotion for an entire game, one system that is very finely crafted and that the player is used to using. Then you reach the water level and everything changes. The controls become kind of slippery and the player feels a bit weightless, leading to much frustration. However, you get the flippers incredibly early in Link to the Past. They're available after the second dungeon, and because of this, you were able to get used to the change in movement before you even reached this point. You also spend very little time in the water, instead finding ways to raise and lower the water level and using those changes to progress deeper into the dungeon where your movement is the same rather than swimming the entire time. This dungeon is also where you get the hook shot for the very first time, which immediately makes it a 10 out of 10 in my book. The boss Argus requires you to pull off its protective layer of minions before you can actually defeat it, marking the second boss that requires the use of the dungeon item to get it to a damageable state. Freeing the second maiden, she goes further into the explanation of the Triforce and how it will grant the wish of whoever possesses it for as long as they live, and explains that is how Ganondorf was able to become ruler of the Golden Land. From here, the dungeons are yours to complete as you see fit. The hookshot lets you cross the river back into the main body of the Dark World, and you can travel almost anywhere from here. The intended path is to head up and complete the Skull Woods, but you can also head down to the Thieves' Town and head beneath the statue in the center of town to beat its dungeon. If you do so, you find the Titansmiths, allowing you to actually go anywhere you want. This helps maintain the spirit of Zelda 1's core conceit, that freedom to do whatever, whenever, while maintaining the structure of a story that Link to the Past introduces and lets the developers give you the first 5 dungeons in order of ascending difficulty and complexity. It is genius, and I almost always do the final 5 dungeons out of order in one way or another. You can also collect 2 more heart pieces, both from gambling minigames, but thankfully the money you get out of the games is often enough to break even. This run I spent on getting these pieces, though there have been several others where I've spent far more. Since I did do them out of order, I'll discuss them in the order I chose to complete these dungeons. First, I traveled to the Thieves' Town and headed into its dungeon. Like the Dark Palace, this dungeon lacks a main gimmick, but it does introduce the rabbit beams, which will bypass the Moon Pearl and turn Link back into his rabbit form for 5 seconds or until he is hit by an enemy. Being the 4th dungeon in the Dark World and the 7th overall, the enemies hit incredibly hard, and even with the Master Sword, they take multiple hits to defeat, but they don't aggro on Link, meaning you can run by most of them as you work your way through the winding upper and lower levels of the first floor. Pushing your way deeper, you eventually find a bombable chunk of floor. Detonating it, you allow sunlight to flood a section of the dungeon that was previously kept in the dark. Traveling even deeper, you find the maiden of the dungeon, not kept in a crystal, but instead behind a series of several cells, and she begs you to help her escape. If you comply, she will not leave the dungeon, instead complaining about how bright it is outside. The astute player will pick up on this and lead her back to the area with the light, revealing her true form as Blind the Thief. You see, back in the Light World, you can actually talk to a guy that foreshadows all of this in Blind's hideout, a space occupying the same area as the Thieves' Town dungeon. He will tell Link about Blind, a thief from the Light World who disappeared one day and who hated bright light so much he kept his entire hideout shrouded in darkness. This, combined with the maiden telling you that it's too bright outside, and the fact she wasn't kept in a crystal like the other 3, should clue the player into going back to that room with all the light. Unlike most of the other bosses who follow some kind of pattern, Blind is pure bullet hell randomness, and as a kid, I fucking hated fighting this guy. But now, especially with the magic shield, I think Blind is a blast to fight. Each time you hit a certain damage threshold, his head will pop off and begin floating around the room while spitting fireballs at Link, while his main body remains on the floor motionless. After a certain amount of time, it grows another head and floats back up and begins firing lasers at you. This leads to the final stage of the battle where there is so much shit flying across the screen that a fairy is basically a must. Freeing the 4th maiden, she tells Link of how the Knights of Hyrule protected the 7 wise men and how it's ironic that he, the last of their bloodline, is to be the hero to save the 7 maidens and the world. Equipped with the Titansmiths, you are now able to lift these black stones that dot the Dark World and occasionally appear in the Light World. Now, you can help this little frog, who is actually the partner of the dwarf blacksmith from Kakariko, and reunite them. With both of them back in action, they can temper the Master Sword, doubling its damage for only 10 rupees. While you're here, you can also find the Mad Batter, who will curse Link to use half the magic for his items. Probably the best upgrade in the game. Doubly so now that you can gain access to all 3 of the medallions. The first, Ether, you can grab immediately after getting the Master Sword. To the left of the Tower of Hera is another stone tablet like that in front of the Desert Palace that tells you to come back once you have the Master Sword. Doing so, you get access to the Ether Medallion, which calls down Arctic wind to freeze everything on the screen immediately. The second is the Quake Medallion, which you get from bothering this catfish guy in front of the Waterfall of Wishing in the Dark World. Quake calls lightning down into your blade that you then plunge into the ground to shake the entire screen and kill anything there. The final is Bombos, which you can get after getting the Titan's Mitts up on this ledge in the Light World, only accessible from the Dark World, similar to Spectacle Rock. Like the others, the Bombos Medallion kills everything on screen by summoning explosions for a large magic cost. You can now also get the Cape from this spot in the Dark World, letting you entirely disappear and take no damage while you are hidden, though it does significantly drain your magic. You can also head up the Dark World's Death Mountain to get the Cane of Birna, another item that provides Link with invulnerability, though this one does damage to enemies that get too close, rather than the intangibility of the Magic Cape. You can also speak with this guy, someone who you can actually see disappear into the Dark World from the Light World, and he will task Link to help find his flute. He gives you a shovel to do so, but given the flute is much better than the ability to dig up a few rupees, I almost always immediately get rid of it. With the flute, you can play the boy his song before he turns completely into a tree and give his father a bit of peace, though the old man does lament not hearing his son play the song. The old man will also tell you to go to the weather vane in the center of town and play the song there. Doing so, you gain access to Link to the Past's main fast travel, the duck. Playing the flute, the duck will scoop you up and take you to one of 8 spots, all of which are close to warp tiles, allowing for quick access to anywhere in both worlds. With the flute, Link can travel to Misery Mire, granting him a heart piece and access to the dungeon of the area. Here, you are presented with the Quake Medallion symbol, requiring you to have the item in order to unlock the path into the dungeon. This is another one of those moments where Link to the Past requires you to go off the beaten path in order to progress, facilitating real exploration of the world rather than someone giving you the location and making it a glorified fetch quest. This being the 9th dungeon, Misery Mire is no joke, throwing Wizrobes at you that can deal 5 hearts of damage to Link. Similar to the anti-fairies sprinkled throughout many of the game's dungeons, the Wizrobes of this game are much better than those of Zelda 1. Taking cues from Adventure of Link, because I can praise that game, the Wizrobes will momentarily appear and disappear in a translucent state before fully materializing and shooting a beam that will cross the whole screen. Even equipped with the magic shield, Link can't block these shots and will have no choice but to avoid them while sneaking in hits before they disappear again. They often appear in groups, usually surrounding Link, which can make it tricky to avoid them, but certainly nothing like their Zelda 1 counterparts. Compared to the other dungeons, Misery Mire does not have many enemies, but it is sprawling, with interconnected loops that test your traversal abilities far more than those of your combat skills. The item you get here is the Cane of Samaria, which is barely used in this dungeon, but can create blocks that explode when triggered again. These blocks are also capable of triggering buttons, letting you hit them whenever you please. After grabbing the cane, you find the boss room. Here is Vitreous, most of its body hidden beneath slime while its minions jump out at you. Similar to Argus, you must defeat all of these minions before the main body of the boss becomes damageable. But unlike Argus, Vitreous will shoot lightning at you similar to Aghanim. Still, he proves no match for the hero of legend, and you free the 6th maiden. Doing so, she tells you of how Ganon used Aghanim as a pawn to draw the maidens into the Dark World, because Ganon's own power was not enough to break the seal. He then sealed the maidens in crystals to be guarded by his loyal monsters. The maiden tells Link that she believes he is the hero capable of defeating Ganon, and tells him that Zelda is waiting for him at Turtle Rock. Hoping to save Zelda immediately, I headed back to Death Mountain, intending to grab a few more heart pieces and then head into Turtle Rock. Doing a quick perspective puzzle, I grabbed this heart piece and then headed to this point in the Light World. Ripping up this rock and smashing down these posts in this order, Link reveals a warp tile that sets you atop Turtle Rock. With the Ether Medallion, you open the door into the dungeon and find your main use of the Cane of Samaria and the gimmick of this dungeon. Over these question mark spots, you can create platforms that will travel over these predetermined paths. Traveling along, you reach this point where you need the fire rod, and remembering that, I pulled out the magic mirror and immediately warped back to the entrance. One of those other little interactions that the game doesn't teach you, but will work to save you a headache of trekking back through a dungeon, especially if you're injured. Hurrying down to the Skull Woods, we reach a truly frustrating headache of a dungeon. The Skull Woods have several entrances and exits, either hidden by the labyrinthine nature of these woods or under these bushes. Almost all of these entrances lead to segmented parts of the dungeon where you have to navigate your way out, largely without access to your map. This wouldn't be so bad, except this dungeon also introduces Link to the Past's Wallmaster, which makes this navigation much more frustrating here than anywhere else. The Wallmaster will drop down on Link, and if it lands its attack, it will drag you back to the screen of whatever entrance you first came into the dungeon. In some instances, this is actually useful, letting you head back to an entrance where you can walk out and jump into some other part of the dungeon. But if you came in from an overworld entrance rather than one of these mouths, it leaves you in the midst of the dungeon far away from any exit. Running about, you also encounter Gibdos, enemies who take many strikes even from the Tempered Master Sword to defeat. Circling about, you find the big key here, grab the fire rod here, and then leave through this exit. Moving north, you burn away this thing, and head down into the last part of the dungeon. Looping about this area, or just running north if you have an extra key that you didn't use in an earlier part of the dungeon, you head down here, burn away these Gibdos, complete this puzzle, and fill up on your magic before jumping down to fight Mothula. Weak to fire, much like its Gibdo minions, Mothula is easily dispatched even as the floor slips and slides beneath Link and these spiked tiles come flying at you. Freeing the third maiden, she tells Link a prophecy of the Great Cataclysm where an evil will claim the Triforce and a hero from the bloodline of the Knights of Hyrule who once protected the Hylia will be able to defeat this great evil and implores you to save Zelda. Now equipped with the Fire Rod, I returned to Turtle Rock to complete the dungeon. Using the fire rod to complete this puzzle, you go deeper into the dungeon and encounter these tubes that will throw you around into another room with more of these same tubes. Looping around here, you grab the big key and head back to the start, moving through this tube instead and out of the dungeon. Using the magic mirror, you can grab one of the last heart pieces from the light world and then head back inside the dungeon. Grabbing the magic shield, you can now block everything but direct physical attacks. Using it, you can block the lasers from these eyes and push deeper into the dungeon and find this mess. There are dozens of switch points throughout the tracks, all of which are designed to prevent you from getting to this central point where you create a block to open this door. Finally managing to do so, you make it to this room, which is full of these eyes, and I actually finally figured out how to block them without taking a shit ton of damage after nearly 2 decades of playing this game during this playthrough. Eventually reaching a room with a bunch of crystal switches, you descend to the final level of the dungeon and make your way to the boss Trinax. This boss needs the fire rod and the ice rod to defeat by hitting the opposite head with its corresponding rod. Much like the Quake Medallion being the key to enter Misery Mire, blocking Trinax from being defeated by requiring use of the ice rod is another one of those moments that requires you to explore. And the ice rod is one of those things you could have had the entire game with no real use till now. I would also highly encourage using the ice rod to defeat the fire head first because it leaving flames on the ground is far more annoying than ice being left behind. Once its 2 elemental heads are defeated, the main body of Trinax breaks away and it begins to slither across the ground similar to Muldrum and requires you to hit it in its middle instead of the end. Freeing the final maiden, Princess Zelda, she tells Link that she believed he was the legendary hero since they first encountered and warns that if Ganon were to escape the Dark World, all would be lost, but if Link can keep him trapped, that he will be able to slay Ganon in the limited realm of the Dark World. Encouraging Link to attack Ganon's tower, you rush back out onto Death Mountain. And normally, this is where you would go to Ganon's tower with all 7 maidens, but since I still need to go beat the Ice Palace, let's swing back down there. You head to this island and pull up the stone to enter the Ice Palace. If the Skull Woods is frustrating, because of its many entrances forcing you to re-enter the dungeon 1,000 times, the Ice Palace is the worst dungeon in the game because of the ice physics on the floor. As I discussed in the Swamp Palace section, water dungeons in games are often viewed as the worst because of how they force a change in locomotion. But ice worlds and platformers also catch this smoke. The floor has no traction, and many of the challenges in this dungeon are based around movement, which makes this dungeon painfully monotonous. The medallions make this less tedious, specifically the Bombos medallion, as they can clear an entire screen and save you from having to fight the Pin Gators, and you can use the hook shot to plant yourself in place for a moment, capable of canceling out your momentum slightly, but it still isn't enough to save this dungeon. Most enemies don't appear affected by the change in the floor, and you are making it so that way you take unnecessary damage because Link is slipping and sliding in ways that you're not used to. The item you get this time is the Blue Mail, upgrading your defense and cutting all damage you take in half. Heading further down, you are supposed to lower these blocks and loop back around to push this block down, but if you have the Cane of Samaria, you can just place a block and go fight the boss. Reaching it, you find Cold Stare, a monster trapped within a block of ice. Using the fire rod, you can melt the ice, but Cold Stare will thrash around inside, causing ice to fall from the ceiling at you. Once out of the ice, it only takes a few shots from the fire rod to kill it and free the 5th maiden. Warning that the power of the Hylia is slipping, she tells Link that only their wisdom combined with his courage can defeat the power of the Dark World. Now that you've freed every maiden, you return to Ganon's tower, where Zelda leads the other maidens in removing the magic keeping you from going into the dungeon and opens the door for you. Once inside, you are met with the best dungeon in this game. Ganon's tower has everything. Multiple levels, difficult combat encounters, puzzles, creative use of different items, and the red mail, an upgrade that will cut the damage you take in half again. It also throws a beefed up version of the bosses that guarded the pendants before you scale your way to the top of the tower and face off against Aghanim again, showing you just how far you've come. Even with the wizard splitting into 3, another round of Dead Man's Volley with the bug net, or the Master Sword, I guess, and he is defeated. With the wizard bested, Ganon reveals himself, emerging from Aghanim and taking off out of the ceiling. Calling the duck, Link gives chase as Ganon breaks through the roof of the Pyramid of Power. Now, you can just jump in, but at this point in the game, you will lose. Ganon can only be bested by the Silver Arrows, an item that you can only collect after completing Misery Mire and the Ice Palace. If you head back to where Link's home is in the Light World, you will meet this little guy who sells bombs for a ludicrous price, but after completing the Ice Palace and Misery Mire, he also has this, the Super Bomb. With it, you can destroy this cracked wall in the Pyramid of Power and find another great fairy who will upgrade your bow to the Silver Arrows and your sword to the Golden Master Sword. The fact this is here is not only foreshadowed by the large cracks in the wall, but by this little guy you can find in the area where the Sanctuary is in the Light World. Getting the bomb and blowing open the wall, we've now spent the last of the money required for our adventure, and I get to show off the rankings. That's right, we are ranking the heroes not on how strong or wise they are, but on how much money they have to spend to complete their adventures. The hero of Hyrule has to spend 340 rupees to beat his first adventure, and none in Adventure of Link because it doesn't have rupees. And the hero of Legend has to spend 2,230 rupees to complete his first, putting the hero of Legend far in the lead. Getting off that tangent, now you are equipped with the tools to defeat Ganon, and you can see the best encapsulation of how far A Link to the Past has progressed beyond Zelda 1. Jumping down, you face off against the King of Evil, just like the first game. He starts the fight by throwing his trident at you, with it spinning through the air and tracking the player as you run across the arena. Once you reach enough damage, Ganon begins attacking with circles of flame that spiral out away from him. He'll also leap up and then smash into the ground, freezing Link in place and causing tiles to fall through the floor, potentially restarting the boss fight. At the third damage threshold, Ganon will remove the light from the room and make you relight the braziers at the bottom of the arena. While in the dark, Ganon is invisible and will take swipes at you. Once you've relit the braziers, the flames reveal Ganon and freeze him in place for a moment. If you don't hit him, he will turn invisible again and then reappear elsewhere. When you do ultimately strike him, Ganon turns blue and freezes entirely, unable to be damaged by anything other than the silver arrows. Repeat this 4 times and he is dead. Very clearly, the team behind Link to the Past took the concepts from the Ganon fight in Zelda 1 and entirely overhauled and perfected them for A Link to the Past. Gone is the random invisibility that requires blind shots from the player, gone is the obtuse ways of gaining the silver arrows, and gone is the possibility you'd run out of arrows because they aren't tied to your rupees anymore. With Ganon defeated, Link heads into the Pyramid of Power and speaks with the essence of the Triforce. The Triforce tells Link that the wishes of those with strong desires are more strongly reflected, be they good or evil. It says that Ganondorf desired to rule the world, which is why the Golden Land warped into the Dark World, and about how he had been building his power for an invasion of the Light World. Then it tells Link to claim the power with a wish in his heart, and Link approaches, making an unheard wish before the game cuts to black. After this, the game goes to an epilogue, and we get to see the outcome of Link's wish, a Hyrule with all of the evil of Aghanim and Ganon wiped clean. The king is alive, the maidens are freed, the priest is safe, Sahasrahla is back in Kakariko, the bug-catching kid doesn't have tuberculosis anymore, and your uncle is alive. In a brief flash, we see many of the NPCs in this game living happy, fulfilled lives. Then it shows the Master Sword return to its pedestal, ready to sleep again forever, and the game goes to credits. This is the archetypal Zelda story. It introduces the idea of the 7 wise men / maidens, the Master Sword, the Triforce's capacity for granting wishes, Ganondorf as a king of thieves, the Sacred Realm, the gods that created the Triforce, the Hylia as a bloodline, and the idea of a prophesized hero. It provides a strong enough structure in the beginning to spur player involvement in the plot, and then opens up, providing enough freedom to do dungeons out of order while not abandoning a story. And unlike the stories of Zelda 1 and Adventure of Link, Link to the Past demonstrates its story in-game with dialogue. It even has a full prologue before the game begins to further immerse you into the story. And while nothing majorly complex, Link to the Past's story does have thematic elements within it. The core theme of Link to the Past is survival in the face of tragedy. And I know that seems a bit too heavy of a topic for a Nintendo game in 1991, but I am being serious. I know we haven't touched on this yet, but this version of Hyrule is the very first in the Downfall timeline, a world in which Ganon was able to kill the Hero of Time and subjugate Hyrule under his rule for an unspecified length of time. However, he was locked away by the Seven Sages and the Knights of Hyrule, most of whom died during the conflict. This leaves Hyrule as a land that barely survived an attack from an almost unstoppable enemy. Hyrule is much smaller than we see in Ocarina of Time, clearly bearing scars from that era. Those descendants of the sages and the knights, Link being one of only few, are also attacked by Aghanim and are forced to live through yet another tragedy. Link seemingly loses his uncle the night he goes to save the final sage's descendant from being sent to the Dark World and is instantly considered a threat by the knights that prowl Hyrule. Those related to the missing maidens, as I've said, are devastated and implore Link to help them however he can. Those in the Dark World are also survivors of Ganon's greed, his use of the Triforce warping the once beautiful land and regular people into grotesque versions of themselves trapped under his rule. But then, when Link is finally able to cleanse the land and the Triforce of Ganon's influence, he can bring those lost back, healing the land of its strife even if only for a while. Link to the Past is about shouldering past tragedy and making it a part of yourself to face against evils in your life. But Link to the Past doesn't only have darker elements, it also introduces the fun and wacky side characters the series is known for, which helps to give the game a lot of its charm. Many of the NPCs also seemingly exist in a world that precedes and outlasts you. They have these feelings about Link before the game began, these little moments of characterization that are far greater than anything from Zelda 2. It also introduces the Kukos, a staple Zelda creature that, when attacked too much, caused them to swarm Link like moths to a bonfire, something so widespread that even non-Zelda fans sometimes know about it. And while I'm discussing the story, I want to quickly touch on the manga adaptation by Akira Himekawa. I know the Himekawa manga are divisive among the fanbase, but I love them. They do take some major creative liberty at times, some better and some worse, but that's what makes them fun. For example, Himekawa takes the name Link to the Past and actually implements it into the plot, with Link going on this quest partly to find connections to his past before his parents vanished. It also introduces Gonti, a bandit girl who helps Link on his journey and gives him someone to talk to during his quest. The bosses you encounter are regular people, each of whom have been transformed into these monstrous shapes because of some character defect they had. Aghanim is also the one to kill Link's uncle, something I headcanon into the game's story along with the apple farm that we're introduced to. The story is nothing crazy. It's Link to the Past's plot crammed into 3 chapters with a little bit more backstory for Aghanim as Link's father's friend before Ganon seduced him to the dark side, and a side plot about Gonti giving up her hatred to help bring down Ganon. But we also get a canon Zell Link, sorry Gonti, and that makes it a 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10, it's a 10 out of 10 manga. 100 P. And while the story is not much to write home about, the art is where this manga shines. Out of all of the styles Himekawa has employed, this is the best art style, with maybe Twilight Princess nudging it out, but nothing can top this Zelda design. She is this ethereal, otherworldly beauty, perfectly capturing the fairy doll vibe Himekawa wanted. Link to the Past is the true definition of a timeless masterpiece. The 16-bit pixel artwork and Mode 7 effects have not aged a day since their initial release in 1991, and I doubt they will age in the years to come. Koji Kondo's iconic score continues to enrapture me in a world of adventure and magic. The movement and combat have remained buttery smooth despite the years of gameplay innovations since its release, but would have been unimaginable when it first came out. The way it teaches the player could be a video all on its own, and hell, the amount of time I took to talk about it in this one video is a testament to how well it's done. It took Miyamoto's original vision and provided just enough structure to introduce a story to supplement the actions the player is already inclined to perform. Its puzzles have become clearer and yet more challenging through better thought out designs rather than not having enough of the pieces from the start. While some of its dungeon designs may have faltered, the vast majority are brilliantly designed and fun to explore. It took the identity crisis the series was having and absolutely solved it, putting to rest any questions about Zelda was. It was not a side-scrolling action-adventure, but instead an explorative top-down adventure about building an arsenal of weapons and clearing dungeons. It introduced more serious concepts while maintaining a lighter atmosphere for the core audience it was aimed at. This is the definitive Zelda for many, and easily ranks among the best games of all time for a reason. The team behind A Link to the Past absolutely nailed it and utilized almost every bit of the SNES's advanced hardware to achieve the magnificence that is this game. And once again, I've been Flartman50, and thank you for watching. I know this one was a good deal longer than the first two, but as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this game. If you've made it to the end, I would ask, as always, that you leave a like and subscribe. I would also like you all to sound off in the comments about your thoughts on A Link to the Past after I spent far too long telling you about how good I think it is.